me just make sure I've got the right one. All right, so I have that going. All right, a little bit bigger for myself here so I can. All right, just confirming, Brooke, you can see my session overview screen.
I can, yeah.
Perfect. All right. So that's a little bit about myself. Wanted to just go over today some of the new capabilities with what Oracle is calling Update Manager. Some of you may know that previously as Change Assistant. It's still known as Change Assistant, to be honest, if you go and download it, but they're basically rebranding it as Update Manager with last year, some of the release 22 offerings, and then earlier this year as well. Oracle is kind of continuing to rethink how some things have been done traditionally. If some of you have a Zoom crash, that's okay. I'll restart it. Some of you have been familiar with Change Assistant in the past. You'll know that it was primarily used on the deployment server, and that meant that only a few people, if only one, could potentially do some of the analysis on the issues or could do some of the downloading of the issues and applying. Well, now Oracle has done a little bit more to make more of this capability available to others. And you can actually run Change Assistant without the need of putting it on the deployment server. So we're going to go over some of the capabilities of that today, just to give you an idea of what you can do now. And it's pretty nice what they've put out there. So I'm going to go through some of that today. So a brief overview, just kind of focusing on 4 topics of this. We're going to show some of the newer ESU analysis from a package and dependency standpoint. Really, you have the ability to do a more comprehensive impact analysis. If some of you are aware of what you had to do prior to this, you had to download the ESU, run the executable, then actually do the impact analysis from the deployment server. Well, this gives you most of that same capability without the need to have it on the deployment server and running. We're also going to go over the ability to identify when a bug was first included in an ESU, along with the latest ESU that it is included in. Basically, this first in analysis was brought in as a way to kind of give a better quick button click outlook of when a particular bug was put into an ESU from Oracle. We're also going to do an overview on the newer capability of special instruction tracking. Historically, I think if you were involved in doing special instructions, you could recognize that there were some issues with that and that a lot of it was manual. So they now have some things stored in the database that allow you to keep track of these, which is very nice. And then also the final thing we're going to look at is the tracking of modified objects from copies of base objects. And what I mean by that is if you have a particular UBE that you have modified as a copy of a base UBE, well, there's now capability included where you can basically populate from history all of those objects, but then also going forward, it keeps track of this. And whenever you do some analysis within Update Manager, it will give you that detail that this particular object was copied from it. So for instance, if you have an R55 something that was copied from a base UBE, well, whenever you go and do some analysis for an ESU, you will see that there's a note that says that particular object that you have modified as custom was copied from this base object. So it gives you kind of a more quick and precise way to know what has been modified in your environment. on here. All right. Historically, some challenges with planning for software updates have been really some bullet points that I put out here around dependencies. So if you're familiar with the prior functionality of Change Assistant, you'll know that there was a list of what I'll call a text list of dependencies that you had to go and review and look at.
Okay, Brian's just dialing back in. Sorry, guys, just one moment.
All right, sorry about that. Got dropped from the call. All right, as I was saying, there wasn't a good way to easily identify dependencies. So you were forced to kind of keep track of those based on the list that you searched for in Change Assistant, which honestly was kind of a pain. So and my screen share stopped too.
I think your screen. Do you want me to try and share it
From
mine?
I got you.
Okay.
I got it. I think I got it. Zoom seems to be crashing on me a lot today. Sorry about that. All right. So dependencies had to be retrieved from Change Assistant, and it was always a pain to keep track of. Also, a lot of the issues that you found were, do you already have the bug fix installed? What details were those if it's already in place, meaning what ESU was it in? And again, because it's running on the deployment server, don't have a lot of outside capabilities, except for whoever has access to that, to look into those details. So offloading it from the deployment server gives more people the ability to look into these things. A big pain point for me historically was always special instructions. You know, I had a routine to keep track of those things manually, which mostly everybody was doing. Well, now, you know, they've introduced a way to do those from a database perspective, which is nice. And then also what customized objects that you have out there that need to be reviewed when taking an ESU if they were created from a copy of something. So these were some of the traditional challenges that Oracle was looking at whenever they enhanced some of these capabilities. Next slide here. All right, so some of these enhancements are released. So basically, Oracle pushed these out with release 22. So remember that you do need to be on 9.2. There is a little bit, you know, you don't necessarily have to be on release 22 to take advantage of some of these. I'll go through that. But basically, Oracle delivered some orchestrations that tie into, Update Manager ties into AIS to run these orchestrations and brings back a lot of this detail that we just went over in terms of the challenges. One primary thing that I did bring up is that you don't have to run Update Manager or Change Assistant from the deployment server. So as long as you have a functional AIS instance and a few other prereqs that we'll go over in a second, you know, you can have others run the same analysis, so you're not tied to someone just being directly on the deployment server, which is nice. All right, so we're going to go over some of the prerequisites and supporting documentation here now. So some prereqs, again, this is branded as release 22. You don't necessarily have to be at that level to take advantage of this. You do need a functional AIS instance because Update Manager will tie into that AIS instance and run some orchestrations. So keep that in mind. You do need the latest version of Change Assistant. That should auto download for you. So pretty much whenever you start it up, it's going to go and retrieve the latest version. So that's not as big of a deal. If you have not installed that before, there is a support doc out there on where to download, prereqs, et cetera. We're not going to cover that in this call. There are two Oracle delivered UDO objects. If they add to those, you can easily search with this bug number that I've listed. So if you search for that bug, you will get the UDO pack that you need to deploy. So that does need to follow the normal routine for UDO packs. Obviously, download, install, share that out, and promote it up like you normally would with any UDO pack. And then there is also an ESU for the special instruction and copied object tracking. So that bug number, if you search on that, you will get the latest ESU available for that. So there's some functionality that they've pushed to the web, and then also some new objects for the copied object tracking that you need in order to review those particular items. Support documentation. So Oracle always suggests this, and I've started suggesting it too. The Learn JDE, which you can get to this Apex apps link from, has a lot of content. I don't really like this link, but it is what it is. I'll show you an example of what you see on that. And then there is a support doc out there. This is accurate. If you even just search on Update Manager, you will get to this particular support ID. And it gives you a list and a brief overview of everything I'm going over today, along with links to the bugs, et cetera. I will show really fast what the Apex apps link looks like. So if you were to navigate
Reconnecting to audio, I think. Just 1 second, everyone. Zoom doesn't want to cooperate with us today.
Sorry about that. Tons of issues today with my phone, apparently. All right, I'll just use my laptop speaker if I have to next time. All right, so as I was saying, this is an example of what you'll see in the learning path for this. A lot of this is similar to what I went over. So you can go out and review this if you would like from this link, and you can search on that as well. All right, so as I was saying, there are some improved, some improved analysis capabilities within Update Manager. So you do get the ability to analyze dependencies more effectively. You also have these new orchestrations delivered by Oracle that tie into historical ESU installation data. So whenever you're running through Update Manager, you will get some of your history that's pertinent to your environment. So again, historically, you had to do some extra work to get to this. So having all of this in one place just makes it a bit more streamlined, gives the ability for others, analysts, to do that historical analysis based on any issue that you need to install. If you're familiar with running Change Assistant. Some of these options are very similar. They just have some included checkboxes that will give you some of that detail. We'll go through a brief demo of this, assuming that my Zoom is not going to crash again. All right, so let me just get this ready real quick. I apologize if it's a little bit small here. I'll try to make it as large as I can for everyone. All right, so I've got some pre-configured searches because depending on how big the ESU is, it may take a while to run. So keep that in mind. Again, I do have this running in our lab. It's a little bit slower, so I do have some pre-populated output just to kind of speed this up. All right, so wanted to show an example of, first of all, just some of the newer options here. So I've got a pre-configured option. Basically, whenever you go to analyze packages, again, you've got some newer functionality down below. This will populate various data for you in your output. If you're not familiar, you can change this as well to CSV or XML. That's been out there forever, but wanted to point that out. There are some newer options also on the summarize packages, include dependent packages. So first example I wanted to show was for doing some analysis on changed objects, new bugs, all objects, and include bug and object relationships. I do have an example of that because I pre-populated it. I didn't want to have the Change Assistant running in the background. Sorry about that. This one. All right, so what you will see here is some of the additional items are out to the right. So because it's tying into, remember this is a lab environment, you will see probably something different depending on your own data, but you will see what prior bugs, remember these are by bug number, have been deployed internally. So by looking at this, I know that, hey, I've got all of these prior bugs. The only new one that I don't have is this one. So you can quickly identify what you do and don't have. Prior to this, it did take a bit more work to get to this same level of detail. And you can scroll down and see some of the other newer functionality. You can ignore dependent packages. I didn't have that selected on this one. But for all objects, in a similar fashion, you see a bit of the history. So you see that this is the current ESU in our environment. We also had it via UN6, which was release 22, applied late last year. We're in the process of doing a release 23 update. I'll have a future webcast on some of that, but and then you do get some of the prior history on when these were applied. So this is a fairly simple ESU, but it's good to show what you see here. So you can see quickly how beneficial this would be because you've got some of your historical data that's easy to pull up and also get info about the bugs at the same time. So next one, wanted to show some dependent packages and what that looks like. One out here that I had a saved one. So basically for this one, it would be similar option. You would go to analyze all bugs. I'm unchecking some of these. All objects, and instead you would click on include dependent packages. One thing to note is whenever you run that, it will take a lot, if there are a lot of dependencies, it will take a lot longer to run. So be aware whenever you do that, very likely to go for quite some time. So I went ahead and pre-ran one because I knew how long it would take. So we're going to go and look out here. So looking at the dependent packages, you will see that it shows the prior dependencies. I'll try to make. And based on what is installed historically here, I know that all of these dependent ESUs have been installed because it has this little comment out to the right that says deployed. So I can quickly run this analysis. I know for sure that it has been put into our environment and I've met all the dependencies. So now the only thing I need to worry about is what else is affected in this ESU. So that's some quick analysis that you can do. You know, there are other items in here that I'm going to cover, but those are quick highlights on some of the newer functionality for the comprehensive analysis or impact analysis. I'm going to switch back over here to our presentation. All right, so another area that I was mentioning that Oracle has pushed out some newer functionality for is for analysis on when a bug was first introduced. This is the ability to identify packages that, aptly named, bugs were first included in. You will see this on the package summarization functionality within Update Manager. So this gives you kind of a quick way to get some insight of bug history and any superseded packages. Basically, if you're looking at an ESU and there's a particular bug that you're very interested in, you can click on the first in from the summarization screen, and it will give you some history on that. This is pretty basic functionality. I will do a quick demo on this on a smaller ESU because of similar issues. If you do a pretty large one, it will take some time to run. All right, 16, 8. We want to do a summarize packages on. We do not want to include dependent packages because that will take some time. So I'm only interested in the summarization. And so as shown in the screenshot on the prior screen, you do get this first in button. So this is only available on the bugs tab and also the objects by bugs tab. If you were to click on one of these bugs and click on the first in, it will do a quick query and it'll show you what it was first included in. I did purposely pick a smaller one with not a lot of history, so keep that in mind. If you pick an ESU that has objects with a lot of prior history, obviously this might take longer to run. I wanted a quick way to just show the functionality. And if you close that, it takes you back to the other screen. If you aren't familiar with this, you can click around and get some bug details. That bug apparently does not have any detail available. Thanks. Not surprised on that. But similar on the screen, you can click through some of the first in, and you would get the first in ESU that it was in. Again, I picked kind of a small one because sometimes that can take a while to run, so just keep that in mind. Pretty basic. You know, this isn't necessarily something that me as a CNC might use. I would picture this more as, hey, we're doing some analysis on some things that we need. When was this first included? Get a little bit of history on the bug, assuming Oracle has published that information, so it pulls it, and then go from there. Over here. All right, my next topic is one that I think is probably one of the more important ones, especially if some of the things you're doing uses a lot of special instructions. So we're going to go through that here. So Historically, I think, as I mentioned, tracking special instructions and the status was kind of a manual effort. I had a pretty decent method that I used, especially whenever you're doing something like a major update and you've got a huge list of special instructions to track, where I would go through and keep them in some sort of a OneNote or something like that and mark through them as they were completed. So as you can see from the screenshot, Oracle has done something similar, and you can actually manage these from the web. This is new functionality that was introduced with the ESU that I mentioned as one of the prereqs. So you can manage this from the web. We'll do a brief demo of that just to show you what that looks like. Basically, it gives you a way to keep track of special instructions that you have or haven't done. And whenever you run through an update, whenever you query on an update or an ESU, and you want to see those special instructions, well, it will tie into your database and pull if it has been done or not. If it has been done and you've marked it as done, then you will see the strike throughs. If it hasn't, then it's not going to have that, obviously. So for me, it's an easy way to track changes and keep track of those. This is very useful in my opinion. One other thing that was introduced, and this is also, I think, important for analysts if you're going to review prior ESUs installed, they now allow the querying of software updates from the web. So instead of having to do this from the deployment server, you can now actually just do this from your web environment. Again, this is introduced in the ESU that was a prereq. So you will need to make sure that's installed and deployed out as normal. It does give you the same, if you're familiar with it, it does give you the same capability that you had on the deployment server, just from the web. And then that is available from menu GH9612, and we will go through that just briefly here for a demo, just to kind of show you what that looks like. Alrighty, so what we want to do is show some examples of what this looks like. I'll log into my lab environment here. Just want to give a brief demo of what this menu looks like if you're not familiar with it. All right, so as mentioned, you do get this capability on the web now. You get some functionality similar to the deployment server. You can click on the ESUs and see some of the history on it. You can also take row exits and look at the list of objects in that ESU along with some history. Again, click into the object if you would like to and get some further history in terms of the detail. You also can look at the bugs by ESU. So again, for me, this is kind of separate from our update manager conversation, but it is something delivered by one of the prereq ESUs. So I think it's worth bringing up. This is very nice because a lot of times myself will get asked questions, hey, do we have this particular update? Is this installed? When was this installed? Well, this gives more people, if they have access to JDE, the capability to go and do that historical research themselves. They can't change anything from here. It's query only, with the exception of potentially if you have access to the special instructions side, which we'll go over. But from this standpoint, this is very useful for querying what ESUs are installed. On the same menu, you do get the work with software update special instructions, which is the newer application that was delivered. This was also delivered with the prereq ESU, and you will see what I mean here. So if you are running through an ESU installation and preparing for that, and you're trying to track what special instructions are done, well, you can go through here, search on bug numbers or by ESU name, narrow that down. Just 19.8.2 here as an example. And keep track of what instructions were or were not done. It's pretty simple. So you basically just either check it or uncheck it, and that's pretty much it. Once you mark it as complete, if you were to go and do a search again for whichever ESU you are looking for, you will see that it'll have a strike through. Pretty convenient, in my opinion. I've been using this now at a few different clients, and it's useful because inevitably for the ESUs that have a lot of special instructions historically, this is a good example, especially if you're doing yearly updates. This one always pops up, I find. So marking that as complete helps you. So let's show now what option that looks like in Update Manager. And how you would get to that would be, so basically if you were to run this, and I do apologize, I've got an issue with my AIS instance, so it won't pull my updated data, but you would click on your ESU and pull just your special instructions, and it's not going to show mine as complete, but we're going to show you what it looks like anyway. It'll run, pull those special instructions for you. Oh, it did. I'm sorry. Okay, perfect. So because I had those marked as complete, this does show them as a strike through. So you can toggle that off. If I didn't have those toggled on, these would not have a strike through. So pretty important functionality. It's extremely useful if you're tracking special instructions. So very useful functionality in my opinion. You did probably also notice that there is an additional option to complete special instructions. So if you know that the particular ESU that you've installed has all of them done, well, you can actually write out to JDE from here as well. So you can click this and it will actually mark all of those as completed. Great. So that's the special instructions demo. Let's run through our object tracking. All right, so there was a newer UBE delivered in this prereq ESU that I mentioned that gives you the ability to populate from history which objects that you've created as copies from base objects. So there's a new field that was introduced to track where objects came from, and it does tie into Update Manager to track things needed, potential objects needed to get updated whenever you're looking for ESUs. So there is this field here. So if you're copying an object, you will see this copied from field in this form. That's where it's tracking this data. So once you have this ESU, going forward, it's going to populate this for you. No, nothing else needed. The only time, and I'm going to shift to my other slide here, the only thing that you'll need to do initially is review and run this R9860A. So this is a UBE introduced that will go through Object Library and history, look at all of your logs, your OMW logs, and predefine what objects have been copied from base objects. pretty basic. So there are two versions to this. ZJDE0001, you run in proof. That's going to give you a preview of what will get inserted into your database. You can see out here as an example, there's only two versions. So basically you run the top one in proof mode, you'll get a PDF, review that, make sure it looks accurate. I have not seen any issues with it not being accurate yet. Just as a little tidbit, every place that I've done it has been accurate. And then you can run the ZJDE0002 option version in final mode. That will actually populate the object librarian. So again, only have to do this once. Going forward, after you have that ESU, it will automatically populate this field for you. So only needed once. After that, you're good. No need to run that again. And we will show an example of what that looks like here. Let me get my screen over here again. I do have an example here to use. So I want to use 19.5. Again, I pre-populated, did some work prior because you have to have an example to use. Do have an example of what it looks like as well, because I had a feeling that this might have come. Yeah, so again, I was showing some issues here with, or having some issues with our AIS instance internally. An example of which you will see if you were to go and query is, sorry, it's a little bit blurry, but whenever you search for an ESU in the PDF, you will see mention of copies, and that is what you can search for. So what you can do is, if you have items that have been copied from base objects, it will show up here. You can search for copies, and it will show you, normally this would be an R55, so this naming convention isn't the best in the world, or an R55 through 59, your normal custom codes to use. But if you search for copies, in particular, if this is what you're looking for, you will get taken to sections of that PDF that alert you to objects that might need to be modified. So that's the functionality there. Bear with me here, because this was, I just want to see if I can get it to show in ours. If not, that's an example at least. But subjects too. So this is useful for quite a few. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to show up. That's okay. So this is useful for, again, once you populate that, the object librarian with the UBE, then you will get this data. Very useful for new ESUs, especially for objects that likely are going to be modified in your environment. Just gives you a quick reference to what you might need to look at. I think it's still useful to do your own analysis internally. I wouldn't use this as the only source of truth, but it definitely helps. And that's the goal, right? Gives another way to look at things in your face that you might need to look at before taking ESUs. It's just an additional layer of analysis that you can do. Okay, that completes our demo section here from our lab. So a couple of final thoughts here. So Oracle does continue to provide ways to make taking software updates easier from a standpoint of doing that analysis and being more prepared for what is going to happen whenever you take an ESU, right? Again, continuing to try to shift some of this analysis from the deployment server to give more people the ability to do a review prior to taking the issues, not only from the CNC standpoint, but from a business analyst standpoint, introducing the software updates menu on the web, again, pushes some of that analysis to others more easily. So it's not just on one or a few people, and just making the whole process easier to do. And that